Welcome back to another lesson in the chronological life of Christ. It's the best I can do. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law is the lesson we're going to primarily look at today, and then we'll continue to watch Jesus as he must preach in other cities. This is part of our ongoing lessons list. We have looked at Jesus arriving in Galilee and the nobleman's son rejection at Nazareth, moving back to Capernaum, 4 men chosen, and the demon-possessed man healed. Remember, it's difficult to make a proper chronological order because there's sometimes, especially with Luke, there's some times when Luke changes the chronology just a little bit. Jesus left the synagogue to his house, went to the house of Simon Peter. Then Simon Peter's mother-in-law had a high fever. Jesus rebukes her fever, and she immediately restored to strength, and she begins serving. And later on, Jesus, as his word spread, as this fame spread, people came from all over and brought all sorts of people for him to be looked after and healed. So we see this recorded in 3 of the Gospels, and this is the situation we have here. But this is a composite, which I think is helpful. Immediately when they came out of the synagogue, they came into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was lying sick with a great fever, and immediately they told him about her, and they begged him for her. He came and stood over her, taking her by the hand and rebuking the fever, he raised her up. Immediately the fever left her, and she rose up and served them. When evening came, when the sun was setting, they brought to him all who were sick and many who were possessed by demons. All the city was gathered together at the door. He cast out the spirits with a word and laid hands on everyone who was sick and healed them. Demons came out from many, crying out and saying, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." Rebuking them, he didn't allow them to speak, because they knew that he was the Christ. All these things were done that it might be fulfilled which was spoken through Isaiah the prophet, saying, "He took our infirmities and bore our diseases." The second spot is early in the morning when it was still dark. He rose up and went out and departed to a deserted, uninhabited place and prayed there. Simon and those who were with him followed after, and they found him and told him, "Everyone is looking for you." He said, "Let's go elsewhere in the next towns, and I may preach there also, because I came out for this reason." The multitudes looked for him and came to him and held on to him, so that he wouldn't go away from them. But he said, "I must preach the good news of the kingdom to other cities also. For this reason I have been sent." And he preached in the synagogues of Galilee. Jesus went about in all Galilee, teaching in the synagogue, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness, and casting out demons among the people. The report about him went into all Syria. They brought to him all who were sick, afflicted with various diseases and torments, possessed with demons, epileptics, paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes from Galilee, Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and from even beyond Jordan followed him. In Matthew's account, we see one after the other these 10 different miracles recorded, and we see also here that Peter's mother-in-law is the third one that Matthew records. Jesus healed the mother-in-law of Simon and Peter. So the summary: he left the synagogue and went to the house of Simon, and Andrew and James came when Simon's mother-in-law had a high fever. He was asked to help the mother-in-law. Jesus rebuked the fever. The mother-in-law was healed, and Jesus completely restored her strength, so she began serving. And here we are in this particular area. Here's a different map of the same idea. And here is all the different miracles that Jesus performed around here, or some of the different miracles Jesus performed around this time. Immediately after healing the demon-possessed man in the synagogue, Jesus moves from there to the house of Peter and Andrew. Was Peter from Capernaum or Bethsaida? Bethsaida. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, John says, and the city of Andrew and Peter. The most probable answer for this is that they moved to Capernaum. The point is that Jesus will stay in that house while preaching in Capernaum and other regions. Peter and Andrew are living in Capernaum. Jesus is obviously their guest. There's no doubt, based on other passages, when Jesus is in Capernaum, he's also staying at this home, Peter Andrew. What happens in Peter's house is something important. Peter has a mother-in-law, and she was sick. And you can't have a mother-in-law without having a wife, obviously. If, as some claim, Peter was the first pope, how was it he was married, knowing that the Catholic clergy claimed celibacy for the pope? It's obvious from this passage that Peter was never a so-called pope. Peter being married would disqualify him. We each have the right to marry one of the Lord's followers and take her along with us, just as other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Peter does. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 5 says. Mark 1:30, Simon's mother was sick and immediately told him of her. These words give us confidence to go to Jesus with our needs and our problems. Often we look everywhere else before turning to God. All of our problem-solving strategies need to begin with prayer. Jesus rebuked the fever in Peter's mother-in-law. How did he do that? Jesus has the power over everything and anything. What is a fever? The abnormal condition of the body characterized by undue rise in temperature, quickening of the pulse, and disturbance of various bodily functions. Sick with a great fever is emphasized by one. Purito is the word from which we have the English pyre or pyrotechnic. It means fire. She must have been extremely a high temperature, running a high temperature. Ancient traditions, including Galen, divided fevers into two classes, a little fever and a great fever. Considering the total lack of insecticides and poor hygiene methods, becoming infected with some great fever such as malaria, typhus, pneumonia, it was an everyday possibility. Luke's also used the imperfect Greek, as she was seized with, may indicate her fever had seized her for a long time. Perhaps this was a chronic illness. Jesus going in, standing over the patient, perhaps taking her by the hand. There the normal bedside manner ends. Jesus rebukes the fever. He charged as with a demon error, exercising his ownership upon the fever, and it left her. Her healing is immediate. It was so complete she needed no recuperation or time to regain her strength. She was able to go and prepare a meal for them. Her complete recovery emphasizes the miracle. Such fevers invariably leave the patient weak, and a period of convalescence is often long and trying, and often full of danger. She showed her gratitude by her willingness to serve. As a principle, it is that we are healed in order to help. We are saved in order to serve. Will Jesus perform another miracle in Capernaum? When the sun was setting, all those who had any that were sick with various diseases brought them to him. He laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. When Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. This is just after the Sermon on the Mount. It was early evening, and the sun was setting towards the Mediterranean Sea. Jesus had been ministering rather extensively all day, and he was tired. The setting of the sun marked the official end of the Sabbath. A day begins at sunset. Sunset is also defined as being able to see 3 stars in the sky. If people had come before sunset, they would have been breaking the Sabbath laws by working. When Jesus was healing, there were 3 kinds of people present. The ill, those helping a loved one get to Peter's house, and people that merely watched. Are you a watcher? Are you watching? Are you trying to find out what Jesus wants you to do? Literally hundreds of people. So many it appeared to be the whole city of Capernaum gathered outside the door of Peter's house. People ill from all kinds of diseases and those possessed of demons. It didn't stop until Mark 1:33. The whole city had gathered at the door. Luke uses this adjective to qualify. Luke says that Jesus healed each and every single one there who had an illness or was demon possessed. Christ's healings, contrasted with the modern pseudo healers, reveals the following. Jesus didn't heal for notoriety. Jesus healed all sorts of afflictions. One so-called faith healer is known to have selected through screening only 40 out of 700 who came to him for healing. The 2 types of illnesses which are mentioned in Mark 1:32 are the same 2 types which Jesus had already healed on that day. He cast out demons in the synagogue, and he heals the mother-in-law, all who were ill. The People who came to him were often totally helpless. Many of them had to be brought, yet someone cared enough to bring them. No two challenging lessons. The most helpless can come or can be brought to Jesus, and he is always available to help. Jesus didn't bypass or overlook a single one. He touched everyone and healed everyone. No matter the disease, they were healed. No matter how helpless, no one ever comes to Jesus that doesn't help. Rich, poor, strong or weak, the Lord forbids no one. Jesus never indicated healing was to be a universal thing. 4 times he healed many. Once he healed 10. 3 times he healed 2 at once. 23 times he healed 1 person. Often he healed only one of the many who were ill. He didn't come to heal people. He came to preach the gospel. Jesus didn't use autosuggestion or hypnotism in his cures. Jesus didn't indicate healing was to be appropriated by all. Jesus healed only Jews with 2 possible exceptions in Matthew and John. Jesus never discouraged the use of physicians and medicines. There was never any question, even from the enemies of Jesus, whether the afflicted were healed or not. They just argued usually about when Jesus healed. There was never a case of relapse. When Jesus healed a person, that Jesus performed no partial healings. Jesus didn't make faith a uniform condition for healing. There were never any failures by Jesus to heal anyone he intended to heal. Jesus specialized in extreme cases and even death. No one ever found Jesus guilty of fraud in his healings. Jesus never asked patients to ignore the symptoms. Jesus never failed to heal all in a group when he proposed to heal a group. Christ's healings were invariably instantaneous. Despite being tired, Jesus was approachable. Not only did Jesus not turn anyone away, there was no sickness or demon that he couldn't heal with. It was not like many fake healers of today who only supposedly heal those who have some ailment that you cannot see or verify. He healed many visible ailments that no one could deny was a miracle. Again, we see him casting out demons who recognized who he was. Jesus didn't allow them to continue to speak because Jesus didn't need the testimony of demons to prove who he was. Plus, it was too early in his ministry. It was too early in Jesus' ministry for the announcement that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus didn't want one of Satan's workers to be the ones to make the announcement that the Messiah had come. Jesus also shows and proves he had authority over Satan and his evil ones. Jesus cast out the spirits with a word. He had healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Matthew's account tells us that these healings and casting out demons was also a fulfilling of prophecy. Matthew says it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, he himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Isaiah's vision is progressive. He sees first a man of sorrows, second a man sorrowful because he bore the sicknesses and sorrows of others, and third a man who has also bore sin and healed the souls of others by doing so. Such was the order of Christ's life. His early years were spent in poverty and obscurity. His days of ministry in bearing, by sympathy and compassion, the sicknesses and sorrows of others. And in the hour of his crucifixion, he became the world's great sin bearer. Jesus is doing his job according to biblical prophecy. Jesus is rebuking Satan for saying that Jesus was the Son of God. What was the problem of Satan lying when he says that? You believe that there is one God? You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. Jesus must preach in other cities. One is morning, Jesus sought to be alone, seeking the presence of God. Jesus was exhausted, drained, spiritually as well as physically. Apparently he had been ministering all day and night, that is, for almost 24 hours without a break. He tried to get alone in a deserted place. He needed to be refreshed and revived in body and spirit. He wanted time alone with his Father. We don't know how long Jesus continued healing the people and casting out demons, but early the next morning before it was light, he goes off to a secluded spot and prayed. While he loved being able to help people and, more importantly, teach them what they needed to know, Jesus needed his time alone to pray to the Father. We should always take time out of our day, no matter how busy we might be, and spend some quiet time alone praying to our Father in heaven. In the Walt Disney production of Alice in Wonderland, Alice comes upon a white rabbit and wants to talk to him, but he has no time, and as he scampers away he sings the following song. I'm late for a very important date. I have no time to say goodbye, hello, I'm late. When I wave, I lose time, I save. My fuzzy ears and whiskers took me much too much to shave. I run and then I hop, I wish that I could fly. There's danger if I dare to stop, and here's the reason why. You see, I'm overdue, I'm in a rabbit stew. Can't even say goodbye, hello, I'm late. In this age of fast food, mega speed computers, it's difficult to slow down and spend time with the Lord. Jesus was also tempted to run life in the fast lane. After all, he was on earth for a limited time, 33 years in which to change the world. The first 30 was spent in a carpenter's shop. By every modern standard, he ought to have been rushing at breakneck speed, and yet Jesus knew how to take time to stop and spend time with his Father. Jesus was up the next morning before the crack of dawn as the dark velvet of the sky begins to pale in the east and the twinkling stars wink out one by one. Jesus makes his soldier way out of Capernaum and up into the rolling hills of Galilee. Jesus walks until he cannot see another living being, then stops and waits in the silence. Quietly, he sits with his Father. There's something special about a quiet time. Being alone in a place where you can't see another soul and where you can be alone with the Lord. How do we make that balance? How do we find that balance? We can begin by reflecting on the fact that Jesus was also busy with the best things. Mark says, a Sabbath day at that he went to the synagogue and taught, teaching that was interrupted by a man with an unclean spirit. Leaving the synagogue with his followers, they went to the house of Simon and Andrew, where the hostesses needed to be healed before she could be served. And the Sabbath officially ended. Jesus was besieged by people bringing their sick and demon-possessed for him to heal. We see a similar set of circumstances in Mark 3, where Jesus was presented with a choice between the crowds all around him and his mother and his brothers. We see it again in Mark 6:31, where so many were pressing in on Jesus and the apostles, they had no leisure, even time to eat. We need to draw strength from the desolate places. In Mark's early chapters is a recurrence of the word translated wilderness and desolate. Matthew, Luke and John also use this word. Sometimes their uses overlap. But more perhaps because the uses are more connected in Mark, all in chapters 1 to 6, we more readily see a pattern that brings out the significance of the wilderness in Jesus' story. In addition to John's preaching and Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, Mark highlights important events that occur in desolate places. In Mark 1:35, the morning after the hectic Sabbath in Capernaum, Jesus got away to a desolate place where he prayed. Mark 6:31, having just returned from the busy evangelism, Jesus invited them to get away by themselves to a desolate place to rest. The last two of these texts are especially important for showing us important things about building up our ability to endure, to continue. Jesus expressed the value of sometimes getting away. Jesus used the time away to replenish his spiritual reserves. Jesus saw this time away as a respite from the demands of service, not an escape from them. Jesus didn't go into retirement. Above all, Jesus saw that what mattered most was service, and that service should be something that keeps us busy. We're wise to learn and take advantage of the value of desolate places. This is not about convenient discipleship. That's almost an oxymoron. God's work is urgent, needs more of the Spirit, once expressed in the prayer petition, wear us out in your service, Lord. It's not about simply being busy. Many good things should be evaluated in the light of what they are, the best things to do with our time. Appropriate choices will be made as a result. We should not feel guilty for times when we need to step back and renew, even from the best things. We should notice what renewal for Jesus entailed. It was meditation and prayer. Consistent attention to those disciplines will sustain us even as we maintain our busy lives. There's an old saying, the most powerful person in our community to be found on their knees in prayer, recognizing they cannot do anything without God's help. Our problem is that we're often too busy. We have schedules to meet, places to go, things to do. And even when we do try to get quiet, it's not long before the outside world is hammering at our door. Here, the hammering came from the crowd and the disciples. As they came upon Jesus, they wondered, what is he doing out here? After all, Jesus is on a roll. Jesus had just started his ministry with a bang. There's work to be done in Capernaum. He's healed the sick, but there will be others who will become sick. His ministry in Galilee is only now getting started. No two great lessons. We need to seek the renewal of our bodies and spirits in the Lord's presence. Most of us do not take the time needed to do that. And we need to seek him out and beg for his help while he may be found. When Jesus was physically on the earth, he was limited to help only those nearby. Now that he is in the Spirit and able to minister everywhere at once, so few of us take the time to seek him out. The crowds kept on seeking, kept on trying to detain him. It's evident that tending to people's physical necessities made Jesus extremely popular. He could have been crowned king had he exploited this miraculous power. What an example these people were in seeking Jesus. Let us go right into God himself with true hearts, fully trusting him to receive us, because we have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and because our bodies have been washed with pure water. Eventually, Simon and those with him found Jesus and told him how everyone was looking for him. No doubt there were probably another crowd of people that wanted to be healed, but Jesus' main purpose was to preach, not to heal. The miracles were used to prove that he was the Son of God, but now it was time for Jesus to move on to other towns so he could get the message out. So Jesus leaves and continues preaching his message in synagogues throughout Galilee. I must. To preach the gospel of Jesus is a must. Jesus considered the need. I must. The question is why? Jesus answered, for this purpose I have been sent. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost, Luke 19 says. For God didn't send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved, John says. As long as day lasts, we must carry out the work of the one who sent me. The night will soon be here when no one can work. We're not saved just to come every Lord's Day and listen to lessons and to sing. We're saved to serve. We're here to tell sinners that Jesus cares, and this can only be done by sharing the gospel. It has been said that instead of being fishers of men, most of us have become keepers of the aquarium. Perhaps we need to ask Jesus to remove us from our comfort zones, to encourage us to spread the good news of Jesus. Luke 4:44 says he was preaching in the synagogues of Judea and Galilee. Different translations, some just talk about Judea, others talk about Galilee. Is there a contradiction? Luke seems to agree with Matthew. It says they went throughout Galilee, preaching in the synagogues. Some translations of Luke said Judea rather than Galilee, but we know that Luke uses Judea in a few cases in a broader sense, that is, inclusive of Galilee, rather than a specific region south of Galilee. So there's no contradiction. Synagogues in Galilee is more accurate and agrees with Matthew and Mark. So the problem is with some of the translations, not with Luke. One day as Jesus was preaching on the shore of Gennesaret, this is the area here. So Jesus was preaching. Well, why not send somebody else? Why not take a break? How great an example Jesus is giving us about preaching. He says, do it yourself. Jesus and his followers in the first century were taking the preaching seriously. How about us today? Even if we face persecution, the challenge is still the same. We must preach the gospel.